I'm so tiny. Hello, fellow fiends. Welcome to another episode of Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces. I am your host, Cassiopeia. This is actually episode 4 of season 4. There's really no significance there. I just wanted to say episode 4, season 4. Uh, so don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. You can subscribe through Anchor.fm website, or you can subscribe to the Patreon, or if you want to subscribe through YouTube, you can actually go ahead and do that. There's actually a subscriber discount that you can hear on the bonus episodes, or if you are part of the Patreon or the Anchor, if you subscribe through there, I actually send it to you. Also, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget you can actually now come and watch me on YouTube. And if you're watching me on YouTube, if you're ever having to do some errands, or you're on your way to work, or you're on a road trip, you can take me along on your favorite podcast listening platform. See how that works? Kind of one or the other, or maybe even both if you like that. So go ahead. I have a creepy case for you this lovely Friday. So go ahead, grab a cup of tea. My besties actually got me this awesome mug. It says Stay Wild Moonchild and has a little moonchild on there. Isn't that awesome? Thank you. And grab a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, soda, whatever you want to, have while you're listening. And let's get started. So I know I say this every episode, but I feel like I need to. Some of the details, especially in this creepy case that I have for you today, can get a little uncomfortable, maybe a little, just listener discretion is advised, just in case. So today I have another creepy case for you, and one that really terrified the residents of the Claremont area of Perth, Australia. Now, when 3 women went missing over the course between January 1996 and March of 1997, while only 2 of the bodies have been found, as the third is still missing. Now, this is one of the highest profile mysteries for over 2 decades, and it was finally brought to rest in December of 2020 when the killer was finally arrested, charged, and sentenced. So, buckle down and let me tell you about the creepy case of the Claremont Killer. Now, this case actually begins with the disappearance of Sarah Spears. Now, Sarah was raised in I hate this word, rural. I am so sorry. That is not something to laugh about. I just cannot say that word to save my life. Rural Western Australia. Now, she attended Iona Presentation College, a prestigious boarding school in Mosman Park. And after graduating, she attended a secretarial school and went to work at BSD, which is an engineering consultancy company. Now, she was described as an amazing person who was full of life and laughter. And we definitely need more people like that these days. Now, Sarah lived with her older sister, Amanda, and the two were extremely close. And Sarah was actually extremely close with her parents as well. And Sarah was thoughtful and responsible, and she honored her commitments. So it was completely out of character for her not to contact her family, and it actually made her disappearance even more worrisome over the first couple of days. Now, on the evening of Australia Day in 1996, Amanda picked Sarah and a few of her friends up from the Ocean Beach Hotel. She then drove them to Club Bayview in Claremont and dropped them off just after midnight. Now, Amanda said that Sarah was happy, in very high spirits. She gave her a hug and a kiss and thanked her for the ride. And Sadly, though, that was the last time that she would see her sister. Now, after leaving Club Bayview around 2 a.m., Sarah made a call to Swan Taxis from a public phone around 2:06. Now, although she was living with Amanda in South Perth, she requested to be taken to Mosman Park. Now, three people stated that they saw her walking alone near the corner of Sterling Road and Sterling Highway. And they also stated seeing a car that wasn't a taxi kind of stop where she was waiting. And she wasn't there when the taxi showed up at 2:09. Now, this is just 3 minutes later. And it was dark, so maybe she was still there, but the taxi driver just missed her because he couldn't see her. But if there was a car that had stopped, most likely she wasn't there. Now, her family said that she was very well versed in personal safety, so they were perplexed as to why she left the nightclub alone after midnight. Sarah's father, Don, stated it was unusual for her not to be with company at that time because him and her mother had stressed the dangers of the city, basically telling her to never be alone. And so it was really unusual that she would actually part ways with her friends and walk alone at that time. So Sarah's disappearance soon gained mass publicity, and unfortunately, she has never been found, and her fate is still a mystery today. Now, Jane Rimmer's family were just as worried when she also disappeared from the same area under similar circumstances. Now, just like Sarah, the 23-year-old child care worker was very close with her family. So, obviously, the no contact also troubled them. Now, Jane spent weekends at her parents' house, having lunch and just catching up on the week. She would also drop by sometimes during the week on her way home from work. Now, Jane grew up in Shinton Park, and she attended Rosalie Primary School, then Hollywood High School, and while also working a part-time job at a local deli. Now, she was described as a well-liked girl who was very popular in school. She loved to surf and was always down at the beach. Now, Jane loved children, so after she graduated, she took a job as a child care worker at a child care center in Redlands. And then she was actually offered a job to be a nanny, like a private nanny for a family who lived in Esperance. Now, she came back to Perth once that job ended as the kids had gotten, older. And she went back to her old employer at the child care center. Now, in the early hours of Sunday, June 9th, 1996, Jane was out with friends. And this is going to sound really similar and kind of creepy, but they started out at Ocean Beach Hotel before moving to the Continental Hotel and then to Club Bayview. Sound familiar? Now, the line to get in was pretty long, so her friends actually opted to grab a taxi and head home for the evening, but Jane decided to stay. Now, she was last seen on a security footage video waiting outside the Continental at 12:04 a.m., where she is seen warmly and very openly greeting a tall, dark-haired male. And police actually believed that this may have been the man who abducted and murdered her. Now, 55 days later, on Saturday, August 3rd, 1996, Jane Rimmer's naked body was found in the bushland near Woolcoot Road by a family picking wildflowers. Now, 27 28-year-old Sierra Glennon had already established her professional career as a lawyer. She graduated from the University of Western Australia with a degree in law and also a degree in Japanese. Now, after an internship at a law firm, Blake Dawson Waldron, she actually began to work there full-time in 1993. Now, Sierra was born in Zambia to Irish parents, and they actually moved to Perth when she was about 6 or 7 and lived in Monson Park. And her father, Dennis, described her as resourceful, resilient, and strong-willed. Jane had actually just returned from a year of traveling the world, and she was going to be a bridesmaid in her sister Denise's wedding. And friends described her as passionate and spirited with a great sense of humor. Now, on March 15th, 1997, just 9 months after Jane Rimmer disappeared, Sierra also disappeared from the Claremont area. Now, like Sarah and Jane, she had been out with friends at, you'll never guess where. Okay, maybe you will, the Continental Hotel, and she was about to make her way home. Now, 3 men said they saw Sierra walking along Sterling Highway at around 12:30 a.m., and they observed her interacting with the driver in an unidentified light-colored vehicle which stopped close by to where she was waiting. 19 days later, on April 3rd, her semi-clothed body was found by a bushwalker off Piccadilly Road in Eglinton. Now, just 2 days after Sarah disappeared, major crimes took over the case. But after Jane went missing, the Western Australia Police Department set up a special task force called Macro to investigate. After Sierra, authorities confirmed they had a serial killer in their area, and the Western Australia government actually offered $250,000 for any information that could lead to an arrest and the capture of the Claremont killer. The largest sum that's ever been offered at that time. Now, the initial investigation was actually focused on the cars seen at the location and the man in the video with Jane. Now, they ended up turning their focus to taxi drivers, especially since all of the women were last seen in circumstances where they would be using taxis. And it seemed that, at least 2 of them had called for taxis to take them home. A massive fingerprint and DNA testing mission was performed on thousands of taxi drivers across the entire area. Now, in December of 2015, fibers from Jane were matched to a VS Series 1 Holden Commodore. Now, both Jane and Sierra's bodies were found with sharp force injuries to their necks, as well as other wounds that had been proven to be defensive wounds. Now, the murders sent a shockwave through the city. As the Claremont killer loomed, police had trouble finding a suspect. Now, in April of 1998, a public servant from Cottesloe, Lance William, was named as a suspect after he displayed some suspicious behavior. And he was actually driving around that same Claremont area very slowly. He was watching women, and he actually even offered them a ride home. But Lance maintained his innocence, and after being watched and interviewed a good 6 or 7 times, he was finally ruled out as a suspect 10 years later in 2008. And now that can actually do... Lance died in 2018, and some people say that his reputation never recovered from being named as a suspect. And I get, like, some people, when you hear that somebody's a suspect in a murder case or a crime, people kind of take it and run with it. And even when they're cleared, people still kind of question it. And I really wish that, like, I get that police kind of want to set minds at ease, but I feel like when you just say, hey, we have a suspect, person of interest, someone we're keeping an eye on, you don't need to name them. Because when it turns out, like Lance, who was innocent, sometimes they can never recover from that that accusation, and it can sometimes really, really ruin people's lives. Now, in 2006, Mark Dixie was also named as a suspect, but after a DNA test and close investigation, he was also ruled out. Now, it would be 20 years before they would make an actual arrest. And on December 22nd, 2016, thank you to DNA testing, police took 45-year-old Bradley Robert Edwards into custody. Now, Bradley was a former Telstra technician who was twice married and a volunteer at his stepdaughter's Little Athletics Club. Now, of course, I'm sure that you can all see it now. He was, not the most stand-up guy, but he wasn't, like a menace to society by any means. He was clearly in a living relationship, so to speak, I guess. He volunteered at his stepdaughter's athletics club, seemed to be a pretty good dad, a good stepfather. He did, his duty as a citizen. But he was charged with murders. And the night before his trial began, he actually pled guilty to other crimes that he was being charged for. And these were actually what he was arrested on. So there was actually an attack on an 18-year-old in her home in 1988. And there was also the rape and abduction of a 17-year-old in Claremont Cemetery in 1995. Edwards admitted to the rape, but he denied and just would not admit to being a killer. Now, it remains unclear how Edwards trapped the women, but it seems that he lured them into his work vehicle that actually resembled a taxi. And detectives managed to match his DNA to a fragment that was found under Jane's fingernails. And prosecutors said that there were the blue polyester fibers that were found on the bodies of Jane and Sierra matched Edward's company uniform and the carpet from his company car. Now, this was a huge relief for them. Bradley was charged with 8 crimes altogether, but he only pled guilty to the 5 non-murder charges. So that was the 5 abduction and rape charges, and then the 3 murder charges were Sarah Spears, Jane Rimmer, and Sierra Glennon. But before the trial, the prosecution actually applied for a trial by judge only, which means that there would be no jury. The prosecution and defense would come in, lay out all of their evidence and their stories, I guess, to a judge. And that judge, while it was granted, so the trial began November 25th, 2019, before Supreme Court Justice Stephen Hall. Now, besides the DNA proof, one of the main pieces of evidence was Bradley's Telstra work vehicle. It was claimed that he used the station wagon after hours to carry out the crimes. And this was actually corroborated by a security guard who recalled seeing that telecom station wagon parked at the Karrakatta Cemetery on multiple occasions for no apparent reason. And it was actually seen after the 1995 attack and right before the disappearance in 1996 of Sarah Spears. Now, during the trial, a witness actually identified a Series 1 VS Commodore station wagon with teardrop head caps in the area. Now, the trial concluded on June 25th, 2020, after 7 months of questioning 200 witnesses. And so, after they rested their case, Justice Hall retired to consider his verdict. Now, on September 24th, 2020, a 619-page written verdict. Now, could you imagine writing a 619-page verdict? 619 pages. I'm sorry. Now, this actually found Edwards guilty of Jane and Sierra's murders and the previous rape charges. However, there wasn't enough sufficient evidence to charge in the murder of Sarah Spears, although the judge did add that it was more likely he was involved. It's just really hard to prosecute on a murder when there's no body, because I'm sure we've all heard the saying, no body, no crime. Now, December 23rd, Edwards was sentenced to life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years. And now Hall actually described Edwards as a dangerous predator who sought out vulnerable women for his own gratification and attacked them. But he declined to impose a non-parole order, saying that a life sentence with a long minimum term was appropriate under the circumstances. Now, here's actually something that irked me, because in 1997, a horse trainer reported that on the morning of Sarah Spears' disappearance in 1996, he actually saw a man who looked very similar to Edwards emerging from the bushland carrying a shovel in the Perth Hills while doing track work. Now, the media reported that the horse trainer rode over to an off-white Telstra station wagon backed up to a Telstra Hut car. Now, according to the report, the man coming out of the bushland spun and went back into the bush, but glanced over his shoulder. And the horse trainer said that he left pretty quickly, fearing that the man would attack him. But when he returned on his next lap, the car was gone. Now, he said that he told some friends about it, but they told him not to report it because he would get wrapped up in the investigation. And so he was also kind of worried to even report it, which is very unfortunate because the police basically said they couldn't do anything about it. But why wouldn't you just investigate? At least check out the area, because just maybe that's where Sarah's body is hidden, and maybe even still there today. Or, even at that time, it hadn't been that long, so who knows what else could have been found to prosecute. It also could at least bring Sarah's family some closure and some justice for Sarah. Now, the only, consolation or solace to come from the entire ordeal is that Bradley Robert Edwards will most likely die in prison. And I don't know about you, but I'm okay with that. And of course, on that note, until next crime, my fellow fiends.
Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces with Cassiopeia is a Pizza and Pigtails production. All episodes are researched, written, and edited by yours truly. You can find new episodes every Friday, with bonus episodes coming out every other Tuesday. You can find the podcast on your favorite listening platform, or now you can find it on YouTube as well. Don't forget to follow along on social media, creepycases.spookyspaces, for all future news, updates, and maybe some content that you won't find on the podcast. Also, be sure to subscribe so you can get access to bonus content, early access to content, and a couple of little thank you swag. If you'd like to contact me about appearing on a future episode, maybe you would like to suggest your own creepy case or spooky space, or maybe you'd also like to reach out about ad space, you can reach me directly at creepycases.spookyspaces@gmail.com, or feel free to reach out through those social media platforms as well. And, as always, see you next crime.